I'm Rachel Clapp-Miller with Force Management. Thank you for joining us for this conversation, Stop the Blame Game, how to use win-loss data to improve sales team performance. Force Management helps B2B organizations improve sales performance. And I'm joined by our senior partner, Tim Caito. Hi, Tim.
Hello, Rachel. How are you doing today?
Great. And I'm excited for this conversation because we've had a lot of pre-conversations about this. And so I'm excited to run through this with you today.
Well, I'm excited at a few different levels. One, always great to be part of this win-loss week. Great to talk about this topic, but I must say that my primary reason I'm excited is I have always in my career been on the receiving end of what these things are supposed to produce. So I'm anxious to move upstream and see what we can do to make those as run as best as possible, but produce what we can use.
Right. Data you can use, right? Knowing why you won or lost is one thing, but actually using that data to drive systematic change in performance is a missed opportunity. And that's what high performing sales organizations are doing. They're pulling that insight into future sales performance around things like sales process, qualification, messaging, negotiation. I know that, Tim, you mentioned you sat through your share of win-loss reviews at a multitude of companies for Force Management and for others. So I'd love to start with your perspective on maybe common mistakes that people make with these reviews and some key components you can do to make sure that they're successful.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So let me set a bit of perspective for what I think we can talk about this week. Rachel, win-loss reviews get done in a variety of ways in the field, right? Some as simple as a self-reported field in a opportunity record in CRM. Why did we win/lose? At the other end of the spectrum, there are far more sophisticated, forensic-driven, third-party activities that are intended to be able to do the same thing, get us insight. And when you look at it, the folks that are listening to this today are going to get a lot of great ideas on how to conduct win-loss reviews that work best for them. But that's not where I think we should focus. I think our focus has to be on a couple of points they all share in common. All those different approaches share in common, right? Number one, there's supposed to be an effort in reverse engineering to look for insights, right? But they also, all those have a tendency to have a common gap that suboptimizes what you can get from those. And that is generating leverageable insights. I want to put the word, the emphasis on that word, leverageable insights. Leverageable insights that we can then go back and incorporate systematically and methodically into forward-looking product development, marketing, solution architecture, support, and especially sales, like you say. So to me, seeking that leverageable insight is what moves us away from what a lot of those approaches generate is, honestly, revisionist history that all too often is focused on justifying why we lost, why we won. I've looked at my share of those fields, Rachel. At the simple end, why did we lose? It almost always comes down to three answers, right? Our pricing. Our pricing was just out of line. We lost because we didn't have the right technical capability. We're not able to sell what we have because it's not as good as what others do. And let me tell you the big reason, Rachel, those dirty, rotten, unscrupulous competitors that we had, right? That's why we lost. Yeah. But then you read every once in a while, well, why did we win? Well, let me tell you why we won. It was kind of my approach, or it was the heroics of our team. We did some brilliant last minute things that saved the day, and it produced the win. Now, I don't know about you. If I was someone trying to get insight from that kind of information of what I should do going forward, what it tells me is I should change my price. I should come up with, more product, more innovation. Well, people already know that. Our competitors, well, competitors do what competitors do. That's their job.
They're
What I
always there.
want to know is, what are we going to do to address those things and not rely on last minute heroics to be able to win our deals. So that was a bit of a setup there. But to me, if we want to use the data and insight that comes out of win-loss reviews to drive maximum impact, it has to generate leverageable insight that can be deployed looking forward. Now, Rachel, that probably sounds like a pretty simple idea, and at face value it is. But to operationalize that simple idea across an entire customer-facing organization, to me, requires a bit of sophistication.
Right.
And so to me, to achieve that, you got to have three things in place, right? So do it however you do it, but put these things in place so that you can take advantage of them at the highest level. And to me, there's three things, right? Number one, you got to have a consistent, structured selling approach. All right. Leverageable insight thrown into a vast universe doesn't give me the same leverage as leverageable insights that I can insert in different points, different leverage points in our structured selling approach. Second, I think we got to have a structured evaluation or assessment approach, right? One that allows us to look at that structured selling process, be able to look at certain things that we got insight on from our win-loss reviews at critical moments in time in those selling pursuits upstream, so that we can look at, are we on the right trajectory? Has history taught us if we stay on this trajectory on this item, it will create good things for us, or it will create challenges for us downstream? So that structured evaluation or assessment approach of the structured selling approach, that's pretty important. Now, that won't be a news flash to a lot of our listeners, right? But I think the third thing you need is something that occurs midstream in our sales process, our sales campaigns. I call it a deal review that allows us to look at these components in a systematic way. Look at that opportunity through the lens of these components, through the lens of our structured sales process, through the lens of our evaluation process, informed by the leverageable insights we got out of our win-loss reviews, to be able to allow us to step back and see what's going on, not at the emotional level, right? At the systematic, methodical level. So that's kind of perspective. I think however you do it, make sure it produces leverageable insights that you could feed into forward-looking activities, especially as it relates to selling and engaging and supporting our customers.
Yeah, so important, that systematic approach. I will probably say that word 100 times in this conversation. But Closed gave us some key reasons on why people win or lose. I'm going to share my screen here so we can put this up. Just from their data of why people win, why you win and lose. These reasons common in many organizations. I'm curious, Tim, what stands out for you when you look at this?
Well, I think any of us could find blame in all 10 of those. How did that happen? And when I hear some of these things, they didn't perceive value or ROI from our solution. That's why we lost. Why did we win? They did see a lot of value in ROI. Well, that's an item on this list. I instantly go to 1,000 joint calls I've been on where I've seen good or bad at all. So I can find blame in all of it. But you know what I really can see in all these, Rachel? I can see that every single one of them could have been detected upstream in the conversation and maybe dealt with way before they became the reason for the loss, right? Now, so if I've got a structured approach to see and assess what's going on in those campaigns, it gives me visibility to these potential risks while I still have time to do something about it, do some course corrections. So that's one thing, right? These are all obvious. They're detectable upstream. The second thing I notice about this list, Rachel, there's a lot of interconnectivity in there. You know, I look at, you know, they didn't see value in some of our capabilities or features. My guess is there was probably an issue they had or preconceived perception about our brand as well. So there's some interconnectivity. But to me, ultimately, Rachel, none of these reasons matter if we can't apply insights gained from these kind of reasons into future pursuits way upstream. You know, we don't need this insight so that we can justify looking backward. We need it to be able to leverage going forward. I'll tell you one quick story, Rachel. 3 times in my career, I've been in the room of a quarterly report call, you know, to the analysts for a publicly traded company. You know, we got the CFO, we got the CEO, they're explaining the reasons. And on 2 of those occasions, I remember where the company did not actually meet their numbers. And on 2 of those occasions, one of the reasons cited was, well, we had a few big deals slip, right? And on both of those occasions, Rachel, the CEO of those organizations, both of them, really, really good CEOs, both of those CEOs in their own way, when the call got done, looked at the CRO and said, we have now used that excuse for the last time. All right. The shelf life on that excuse with analysts is 1 time. All right. You know, what are we going to do about it going forward? All right. So I think this forward-looking view of this, it's great that win-loss reviews produce insight. To me, if it's not leverageable insight, and we don't have the systems, the structure, the operating and rhythm in place to receive those insights, we're not going to get the most out of it.
Right. And I'm sure people watching this are looking at these reasons, knowing that in their organizations, they come up time and time again for reasons why you lost a deal. So the question is, right, what are we going to do about it? And you made such a good point earlier about pulling this into those deal review process. Let's go over the questions that you need to be asking as you look at the deals to gain information that helps you systematize it.
Yeah. So real quick, when we look at that slide before with the 10 reasons, you know, I think that's fine. You could go to that next view, because I think the all 10 of those actually, Rachel, when you analyze them, have a tendency, each of them, they fall in one of 3 buckets. Sometimes they fall in a couple of these buckets. All right. One bucket is, you know, customer interest. And as it relates to if those are reasons for a loss, you know, the question I have is, did we understand the problems the customer is actually trying to solve? Did we look at that customer situation through the lens of their problem that we know we have some expertise and track record to solve? Or do we look at that customer situation through the lens of our offering? And, you know, we were trying to convince the customer our offering actually fit their problem without really focusing on the problem. So do we understand the right problem? And we see this, you know, in forward-looking pursuits all the time, Rachel. We're aimed at the wrong problem. You know, we're aimed at solving a technical problem, and ultimately their driving interest is to launch a new product successfully, reduce churn, drive efficiency, ensure compliance. Whatever those interests are, we lose sight of them. And that's why I think some of those reasons for loss showed up. I think there's a whole nother bucket tied to our position to compete. Did we actually understand how it is that our solution fit the interests, the needs that the customer has, relative to all the different landscapes that are influencing their decision criteria? You know, that they didn't see value in our solution. Is it because our solutions are inherently bad? No, I think others have bought it. It's did we effectively connect, right, our approach to their issues relative to the options the customer had. You know, I look at it very pragmatically, Rachel. Somebody else did a better job if we lost. And, you know, so, and sometimes that's because we were counting on the decision criteria that we wished they had were actually the ones they were going to use, right? We might not have been in a position to compete from a mentor, a coach, a sponsor. The political landscape might have put us in a bad position to compete. And then the, you know, the last thing, maybe it's a culmination of the previous two buckets, our sales approach. You know, did we align our solutions to their big problems? Did we influence that decision criteria? Did we put ourselves in the best position to compete? So when I look at these three buckets, Rachel, then that kind of, you know, aims us in that direction that you were just mentioning. If we know this, then there's some questions we can ask upstream to try and identify, detect some of these issues. They either drive us to a win or cause us to lose, but we can detect it much earlier so that we have a chance to address it and skew it more towards the win than the lose.
Right. You want to bucket them so you can look at these trends so then you can improve it in your sales organization. You mentioned questions, Tim. We have a slide here on questions that you should be asking on every deal. I'd love to have you go through that for us.
Yeah. So, you know, what I think about is when we are asking a set of questions upstream in the campaign, right? None of those answers should be a surprise at the end.
Right.
You know, if in a pure world, none of those should be a surprise. Every once in a while, something comes up we couldn't possibly see. But in an ideal world, we could have had visibility to those things upstream, but we missed them. And sometimes we miss them, Rachel, just because of the complexity of the situations we're in. It might be a really complex problem that's got a lot of different angles to it. It might be a really complex, you know, political or influence landscape inside the customer's organization. There's a lot of different opinions on what should be done. There's even a lot of different opinions on what the problem is. It could be a really complex competitive landscape. And in the midst of all that complexity, we can feel buried. We can feel almost like totally, you know, I'm just blocking them as they come in here. I think this is where having a systematic and methodical approach to asking a set of questions every single time, that in the midst of that complexity and all that we're trying to manage in those kind of moments, we've got systems in place that allow us to check it. These questions, Rachel, I use the analogy of the checklist that a pilot uses when they fly a commercial aircraft, right?
And they do it every time.
They have flown that aircraft 1,000 hours, Rachel. But if you and I are sitting in the back, right? I want to know that they flipped every switch correctly. You know, I don't care what experience you have. They go through the checklist methodically, right? That's not a reflection on their capability. That's not a lack of confidence in them. It's best practice. Yeah. Now, I live in Atlanta. There's a few pilots around me. And one day, you know, I just said, hey, why do you guys do that all the time? You know, don't you know how to fly that thing? And they go, well, Tim, there's a very simple reason, right? Yes, most every time that checklist, we got it all, right? But there's a few items on that checklist. If we miss it, I hate to say it, it's going to be a very bad result. And the bad result will impact me personally, immediately, and certain. So I use that checklist every single time. So, you know, let's bring the idea of a checklist into these questions, right? Yeah, I think you can avoid a lot of these problems by upstream asking these questions and put you in a better position. So let's look at a few of these. You know, what is the business issue driving the compelling events that are related to this opportunity? Ask ourselves up front. Don't just take the answer from one person. Look at it across multiple folks. We use a term, Rachel, in force management called the collective yes. Some
Right.
people that are listening to this will chuckle. And what's the collective yes represent? Well, it kind of pushes back on the idea of the customer. You know that
Right.
phrase, right? Right? Makes you
Multiple
think it's
decision
one
makers.
person. One person in the midst of all that complexity represents everything that you need to know about this situation, or one function, right? When reality, there's probably a lot of different perspectives here. And my first question is, before you tell me about how we fit, the size of the opportunity, the close date, impact on service, before we get in all that, I want to zero in. What's the problem? Have we accurately defined it? It is the stake in the ground that influences everything else. Because once I know that, then I can ask the next question, Rachel, which is, besides the people we're talking to who are maybe making the decision, who else is impacted by the decision? A lot of the times we lose opportunities, Rachel, is because someone that is impacted by the problem, that's not on our radar. They're on the periphery somewhere. You know, it was the people in finance. We didn't see it. It was the people in risk and compliance. We didn't see it. It was the people in customer support. We didn't see it. They weren't involved in the decision process. It was the general counsel. We didn't see her, right? It was because we just said, who's involved in the decision, not who else is impacted. Right? And guess what? If they have influence and they see a decision about to be made that will create a challenge for them from their perspective, they usually have enough power to send the decision in a different direction, to kill it, to delay it. So that's a big, these first two have nothing to do with us, Rachel. You know, everything to do with the customer. And then go to the third one. So how are they going to make their decision? Right? We maybe can influence the decision criteria, the next one, but I want to know, what are the steps? Are there people out there, we might not even know, have not only an opinion, they have a formal role in approving. So how well do we understand it? A lot of times those opportunities that slip, hey, Rachel, you know, the CEO tells the CRO that excuse is gone. A lot of the reason it slips is because we miss somebody or something in that decision process. Obviously, knowing who we're competing against, how are we positioned, not just technically, how are we, not just at the solution level, how are we positioned to execute our strategy, which means we got to analyze our strengths and our gaps relative to this situation. Big issue the customer is focused on, their interests, the specific competitor we're looking at across all those different opinions across the collective is. That's the position I want to know, so that I can then translate it. You tell me what our strategy is. And I want to know that while we still have an opportunity to execute it. Don't tell me, well, here's our strategy. We don't know a lot. We don't really know what's driving this thing. We're not really that clear on all the people that are associated with it. We really don't know much about what the decision criteria are, but I can guarantee you we haven't influenced any of it. But that's not a problem. We don't exactly know when they're going to make their decision or even how they're going to make their decision. And I think I know who the competitor is. And I can tell you all the ways our technology is better than theirs. I just don't know if those things matter to this customer. So what's our strategy? I'm going to bring in my SE and we're going to do an awesome demo. And at the end, maybe you could come in and tell them how important they are to us. You know what? I don't want to find that out with a week to go in the campaign.
Right.
Now that is an over-exaggeration, obviously, but to me, it's asking these questions upstream. Any one of them can expose a gap that today is something we can target and address if we take that gap through these questions we ask that are part of our, structured assessment, run the situation through the lens of that structured assessment that was influenced by leverageable insights gained from win-loss reviews, run those insights through the filter of our structured analysis, insert it into our structured sales approach, with this insight upstream, we now have ability to make sure that those gaps don't eventually turn into risks that either cause us to lose, or in my opinion, Rachel, what is equally as bad, we don't win as much.
Right.
You know, that's where I think these questions come into play.
Yeah. And those of you watching, feel free to screen grab them. They're great. We use the term, Tim, sales hygiene, and combine that with the systematic approach to doing all this. If you're doing this on every deal, you will then have the information you need to course correct. And then also, when you have that win-loss data, it shouldn't be a surprise, as you said. So I'd like to talk a little bit to the people watching right now. If I'm a sales leader, and I know we have with this problem, I'm listening to all the great gems you've been dropping today, Tim.
Well, thanks for saying it that way, Rachel. I appreciate it.
What are my remedies to avoid the revisionist history, right? Get these things upstream. Where do I start? What do I do?
Well, you just said the first thing, Rachel. Okay.
Okay.
Bring this all upstream, not towards the end, right? When do we check in most often on the progress we're making, our position on opportunities? We have a tendency, if it's a deal forecasted for this quarter, we're going to look at it in that quarter or maybe towards the end because it's forecasted, for goodness sakes. Well, in that case, what we're usually doing, Rachel, is dealing with the hand that's been dealt to us. We just got to find a way to make the most out of it. I'd much rather do this way upstream when we still have a chance to, we got a lot of runway left. We still have a chance to be able to address and maybe course correct. So that's one thing. But here's another idea, Rachel. You said it, sales hygiene. Well, sales hygiene is the responsibility of the entire organization, not just the sellers. Who else is involved in shaping some of this, that we're focused on the right opportunities? Well, to me, that's part of what marketing does. Get that word out there of what are the big problems we specialize in. For our business development reps or sales development team, how do they get us on the right trajectory? Certainly the sellers, but what about the solution architects, the solution engineers that are helping to shape and architect what we can do? What about the implementation team, Rachel? More importantly, what about our customer success team, our professional services team, our account management teams? We all have insights to the answers to some of those questions. And to me, Rachel, not only doing this asking these questions upstream, but asking it to multiple people that have multiple perspectives on the answers. Hey, and Rachel, I'll bring in one other group. Well, maybe two other groups. Our partners frequently have visibility to some of those answers that we might not have. Do we ask those questions with them in the room? Here's my third group. What about our champions? Our champions within that target organization that want us to win because they win as a result. Are we asking those questions in their presence? We have a tendency to want to keep this behind the screen. Hey, if they want us to win, I want to make it easy for them to give me insights I might not have. So it's upstream, it's broaden the net of people you ask them to, but then it's the discipline of that hygiene that you talked about, Rachel, every single time. Not just managers, not just fields in our CRM, not just deal desk. It's the entire customer-facing team, right? Dealing with these questions early on in a systematic, methodical way so that we can make sure we identify the gaps when they're just gaps and they don't turn into risks. So, to me as a sales leader, starting to ask those questions early, operationalize those questions in your normal operating rhythm so that you got time for that course correction and not, reacting to them when they become risk towards the end, and hopefully not after the loss. So, and one last thing to mention here, Rachel. We call them win-loss reviews for a reason. I see a lot of times these get done for the losses. How did that happen? You know, how, with all that we did, how did we still lose? What are our competitors starting to do? They started to find ways to beat us. Is our product not aligned right? Are we sending the wrong message? Did we miss something in the sale? But you can get, as most people that are listening to this know, you can get a lot of really leverageable insight from just as systematically, just as methodically, using the structured assessment, look at the wins as well. Why did we win? I'm going to dig into that just as much as why we lost. When we win, high fives, let's celebrate. You know, this is awesome. We not only closed the deal, we won the quarter. Take a few days off. Not in my world, right? So here's the ultimate idea, Rachel. I think you can achieve all those things. Do it upstream, do it with more people, look at the wins as well as the losses, consistently, systematically, methodically ask these questions. The phrase we use here, Rachel, and I think, you know, it's kind of got a general meaning in the marketplace, weave this awareness, these questions, and the pursuit of leverageable insight into our normal daily operating rhythm as a customer-facing team, right? It's the operating, it's the pilot's checklist. No one says, so what are we going to do now? No, this is the time. It's structured. They don't all do it because they remember to do it. They do it because it's part of the normal operating rhythm to fly that plane. To me, I want everyone to know we're going to do this and we're going to ask these questions. Not just me to you. I want you in full transparency to know these are the questions we got to ask. You should be asking these questions on a daily basis. When we turn it into our normal operating rhythm, I think we can identify that these are high leverage activities that, if done consistently, will more consistently be able to allow us to leverage the insights gained from win-loss reviews and operationalize them into our forward-looking pursuits. It will help us avoid the things that cause us to lose, but do more of the things that cause us to win.
Yeah, well said, well said. And also stops the blame game and revisionist history. Well, thank you for going through that for us today, Tim. Appreciate it.
Well, again, I have a bias, and my bias is give me information, that's great, but give me information I could use. That allows me to put something in place that leverages that information in the best way. So I think when we connect those dots, it's very powerful activity, and it leads to more wins, which is what we all want.
Yeah, and as we wrap, we want to thank Closed for having us as part of Win-Loss Week. And if you want to hear more from Tim, he's on LinkedIn. You can connect with him there. And to learn more about force management, you can find our resources at forcemanagement.com.
Great being with y'all. Take care.